I'm Bessa Whitmore, and I teach a fourth-year undergraduate seminar in Kruger College for students studying international development. And these are 21, 22-year-olds who are very good achievers academically. They can do papers and exams very well. What they lack, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, is any experience with an NGO or out there in the world, which works quite differently than a university does. So I set up a project with an NGO in town that does international work, in this case USC Canada, and I meet with them a couple of months beforehand, several times over the summer, and we work out a project that's going to be useful to them. And then we, depending on the number of students, we divide it into chunks of 3 or 4 sub-tasks. So with 10 to 15 students, it's usually between 3 and 4 subgroups of 3 or 4 students apiece. This gets presented to the students at the beginning of the course, and I set it up for them, basically. I facilitate the first couple of classes, and I use a community service learning approach, which essentially means that what I do is set it up for them, and then I back off and turn it over to them. So we sit around a table, and I sit around the table with them. I don't stand in front of the class. They do the facilitating of the class. Each class, they divide that up. They decide how to organize their work. They decide how to divide it up, how they're going to make their report to the agency, what it's going to look like, all of that they decide. They also do, that is a group grade, so the significant part of their grade is a group grade. So it works with them, hopefully. I structured it so it works with them to collaborate rather than compete with each other. They also do 2 individual reflexive journals in which I ask them to step back from the learning and to reflect. What am I learning here? What do I know now about myself that I didn't know? What do I know about working in teams? In the real world out there, they work in teams. Certainly in international development, they will. And they don't have training in this, really. So I think this is important for them to do. In their reflexive journals, well, let me back up. I set it up by doing some team building stuff. So their first assignment is to go out and have some fun together. So that first week, their assignment is go have fun. Go have a picnic, meet in a coffee shop, meet at somebody's house, have a meal together, get to know each other. Find out who you are, what your experience is, what you hope from this course, what you fear from this course. And we talk about that in the first couple of sessions. So I do some other exercises as well. So hopefully that begins to build some teams, and I give them some pointers around that and then back them up if they get into trouble, and sometimes they do. Sometimes there's conflict because some people don't carry the same load some people feel they're doing more work than others, and when they come to me with that, I ask them, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to tell that other person that you feel you're carrying more of the load, you're doing more of the work? Because that's what they're going to need to do out there, and they don't have a professor to come to out there in the field. What I get out of this is the aha moments that they come up with, both collectively and individually. In those reflexive journals, don't talk about the content. So, for example, last year they learned about community seed banks. That's USC Canada's topic. And so they learned lots about community seed banks, but I don't have them talk about that. They talk about what they learned about international, working collectively in international development, what they learned about themselves as a learner, how they manage their time, and what they learned about that. So really reflecting on their own learning rather than on spitting out the content for me. I don't need that. That's in their report. One of the big motivations for them is that it's useful. It's useful to somebody. So they become very highly engaged, and they are students who want to produce a very good product. So they're very anxious to do it well, and that's a big motivator as well. It's wonderful to see these students step back and reflect on some of the things that they've learned. And I think of one example of a student last year, or several years ago actually, who was a real perfectionist and needed to be in control of the final product. So she volunteered to do the editing for the final product. And at the very end, when it was all supposed to come together, her computer crashed. And she could not retrieve the material and had bad experiences with group work before. So here she was put in a position of having to depend on others. And they came through beautifully for her. Her colleagues rallied around and said, "Oh, we've got our stuff, we'll send it back to you." And the report was fine. But she reflected on that in her journal and how she needed to let go of some of that control and to learn that it's okay to depend on others. So that's some of the reward for me, and I'm hoping for them too.